Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you so much for joining us. Boy, it's been a very busy week regarding not only the political campaigns and what's happening in each party and the way statements made by the candidates. The fact that both presidential candidates felt the need to go meet the Pope this week, and these pictures of the Pope were made headlines. And of course, there was a lot of discussion about that. But there was also there was once again, and this happens usually in every campaign, but this time it's happening, I would say, with a force, and that's very concerning. It has to do what will be the role of organized crime in this electoral process. And particularly in the last 3 weeks, I would say, since there's been reports, three international media groups reported that the President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador's campaign in 2006 may have received money from organized crime. This is 2006. Well, now this week, another colleague has reported, and there was an interview with a leader of one of these groups, um, saying that yes, that his group, and he was present, and his group, and the Zetas in the past, because he represents, according to this interview, he was part of the Zetas groups, which is a very deadly and violent criminal group, had also provided money for the Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador's campaign, and I think he also insinuates other campaigns. So the big question mark is, what's going to happen with all these accusations? How could it affect the campaign? Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador is not looking, he's not seeking to be reelected, but clearly his presence and his voice is going to play a very important part in this election. So that's why I really appreciate today's guest, Federico Berrueto. He's a political analyst. I know you've been following these issues throughout the years. It always amazes me, Federico. Welcome to the show. How, when these
Thank you.
accusations come up, or the fact that the security situation in Mexico is atrocious right now. Quite it is terrible. At historic levels, the number of homicides and disappearances, and there seems to be no political cost for or political impact on parties who, one way or the other, may have failed in trying to control violence. I'm not even talking about organized crime, controlling violence in Mexico. So let's start with that. I mean, all these accusations, is this going to have any impact in the elections? Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. Well, I have to tell you that Mexico now is in a very difficult situation because there is a sort of a cynical attitude in many Mexicans.
Hmm.
Mexicans at the bottom, but also the Mexican elite. The
Hmm.
Mexican elite is quite indifferent of what is going on several issues. For
Hmm.
instance, the attack of the freedom of press, the attack of the judiciary power,
Hmm.
the attack to the whole democratic system. Well, it seems that the elite doesn't care about that. And it is really quite difficult because if people from the top doesn't care about that, why the people at the bottom are going to be quite involved in those issues?
But
And
but
yeah,
let me just say, but when you look at what these statements that were made this week by one of these leaders of one of these organizations, which clearly the intention of this criminal organization, this is in Guerrero, is to have the ability to control almost every part of a citizen's life, by where you buy meat, how much is water going to cost, how much is gasoline going to cost. I mean, it's beyond trafficking drugs or migrants. It's just controlling the population, controlling their lives, controlling their decisions. I mean, there is an impact on the middle class and lower, and in the lower class. I mean, it's there. It's happening, and there doesn't seem to, at least in the polls, when you look at the polls, the popularity polls of President Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador, who's still at 54% in terms of acceptance, I mean, doesn't seem to affect his popularity. So I have to think it's not going to affect people's votes in regards to voting for the president's candidate.
Well, Ana Maria, so far until now, perhaps it's going to change at the time of the
Hmm.
campaigns. I can see if the campaigns open up a lot of issues. Perhaps it's going to change the view of many people about the power, the president, and the different options, the electoral options. But
Hmm.
so far, what I can see is that the government, mainly the president, is in a denial attitude. That is to
Hmm.
say, nothing wrong is going on,
Right.
everything is okay. And to some extent, many people in Mexico are in the same attitude. That is
Hmm.
to say, to deny what is really going on.
Hmm.
And as you said, well, people are facing the consequences of that sort of situation, a very hard
Hmm.
situation in terms of security. So, what in my view is that uh, the election is going to provoke a sort of revolt. We are going to
Hmm.
see this Sunday in the march of in a few days if
Hmm.
really people is going to ask for a change.
Hmm.
If we see that on Sunday, well, I
Hmm.
can assure you that in the campaigns, we are going to have a very different situation of what is going on now. The
So you
president is to be in
you
question, and perhaps the election is going to be quite close.
so you do believe that if there is a huge showing of people at these protests that are going to be taking place throughout the country this Sunday, um, that if there's a show, um, this could mean that there's
Anticipate.
much more interest, that you can anticipate that there could be much that people will show up, first will show up to vote against the candidate of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, or if there is a very low showing, that means that also reflects the lack of interest, and that the candidate, Claudia Sheinbaum, is very likely to be the next president of Mexico simply because there hasn't been this interest by the population. So it's based on how many people show up to these events this Sunday.
Yes, I have to tell you this, that the main sentiment that is in the election and is something that cannot be measured by polls is
Hmm.
the discontent. Eh,
Hmm.
and it's not only the case of Mexico. It happens in the
Right.
States, it happens in
I know.
Argentina and in Spain and everywhere. That for polls it's very difficult to measure discontent. And
Hmm.
I think that we are going to see this Sunday to what extent that feeling, the
Hmm.
discontent, is in the population. If many people go out this Sunday, well, you can anticipate that many people are going to vote on June, the first Sunday of June,
Hmm.
against the official candidates. Not only
Hmm.
Claudia, I think it is much more important what could happen in the Congress. And
Hmm.
to some extent, I think that regardless if Claudia wins or loses, if in the Congress there is not a robust official majority, we are going to have a different game. And uh, the cause of that different game is mostly citizenship participation.
Now, this anger or disgust, I guess President Peña Nieto called it malestar.
Yeah.
Remember when he talked about it when he was president, and his polls, his acceptance polls were very, very low towards the end of his administration. He talked about this malestar social, and he was quite angry about it because he seemed to not understand why people were angry, or the voters were angry. Why would right now, what bothers? Mexican voters the most, even though they still show a certain high level of acceptance of President Manuel Lopez Obrador, but in some areas there clearly there's anger. What I mean, can that anger translate into people actually going out to vote?
Well, it depends of two issues. Corruption, if the opposition makes very well the case that the Mexican government, even Lopez Obrador, is a corrupt president, I
Hmm.
think the whole building is going to collapse. The consensus is going to collapse. And also, it happens to be with violence. Many
Hmm.
people are affected by violence. And also, if people believes that the policy, the Mexican policy of Lopez Obrador policy is
Hmm.
impacting violence, I think you are going to have the elements for that anger in order
Hmm.
to vote against the official candidates.
Hmm. Hmm. Now, there also is a question mark as to how much power these organizations exercise in different parts of the country. I mean, maybe polls don't even matter at this point. If you have a criminal organization that is going to pressure uh, the voters, and it's an organization that has territorial control in different municipalities and can pretty much know who's going to vote in favor or against. I mean, maybe polls don't matter anymore. I mean, it really matters what these organizations want. I mean, this sounds terrible, but but are we at a point where the vote is decided more, or the results of the election is going to be decided more based on what these criminal organizations want or their needs?
Well, in some parts of the country is going to be the case.
Hmm.
And how long, how much is the extent of the problem? And I think just as the information that we have about it is around 20% of the country is facing a very difficult situation for electoral freedom or for the normal electoral process. That could, at the moment, perhaps with official supervision and uh, perhaps even the agreement of
Hmm.
some social actors at the church,
Hmm.
perhaps going to reduce it to 10%. But what matters is what's going to happen at the election, at the day of the election, and
Hmm.
mostly the case that is going to have, very surely are going to have the electoral authorities in order,
Hmm.
well, to see this in in this place, in this municipality, or in this town, we cannot accept the result because the involvement of the organized crime.
So how does this work? If you said that for up to, at least with the information available right now, it could be up to 20% of the country elections. It's going to be very difficult for elections to take place because you can't install the uh, the election sites. They're killing candidates. They're threatening candidates. Uh, Authorities may not be able to even reach these sites. If we talk about 20% of the country, what does that mean in terms of when does the red line kick in and you have to literally annul elections in Mexico because people weren't able to vote?
Well, I have to tell you that it's very difficult to have proofs. I mean, material proofs in order to reverse or to that the result is going to be
Annulled.
desconocido, anulado.
Yeah, yeah.
And the well, it depends mostly of what the political parties or and the electoral authorities are going to document.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, uh, because of the denial of the federal authorities that there is a grave problem, they said everything is okay. Well,
Right.
you cannot count with them at most, perhaps in order that the election is going on with
Hmm.
normality. But
Hmm.
the interference, the intimidation of candidates or voters at the same day of the election perhaps it's going to be very, very difficult to document all the irregularities.
Hmm. I wrote a piece, an op-ed this week, kind of highlighting the role that the Catholic Church is trying to play in some parts of the country, and negotiating with these organizations, kind of a peace truce. And I was speculating, are we going to have the Catholic Church or people, priests having to negotiate with these organizations so elections can take place? I mean, the whole thing is becoming so ridiculous in terms of
Ridiculous, bizarre.
it's
Yeah,
it's 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 horror. There's so much violence, and much of it is not documented. I mean, the media groups, especially local media groups, it's impossible. They can't even write about this because they kill their reporters,
that's
or
right.
they have to shut down their sites. And national media, yeah, I work for national media. You try to report it, but it's just so much is going on that you don't even get the nitty gritty of how this is affecting the daily life of people who live in Acapulco or Chilpancingo or all these municipalities. I mean, how do you document this except when you have testimony by, criminal heads of criminal groups saying, yeah, I gave money to these politicians. I mean, is that going to be the way you document this? How do you document that? How do you document what's happening?
Well, it's going to be very difficult to document that, but I have to tell you this, that, and we have to face it, is that negative reality that
Hmm.
the government, the prosecutors, doesn't care about the rule of law.
Right.
That is something that we have to, well,
Accept.
to think about it and to act
Hmm.
from that perspective. Otherwise,
Hmm.
we are going to see or to believe that everything is okay when really we are in a very, very difficult situation. The whole
Hmm.
country, not only
Hmm.
those areas where is a presence of the organized crime, but also the old electoral process. The
Hmm.
president in the Mexican law cannot be involved in the campaign. And the
And he is.
president every day is in the campaign. And
Hmm.
well, there is no rule of law.
Hmm. So and I really appreciate you joining us. So just one last question or comment. Do you so what you're saying is that there is, as of right now, it seems that at least 20% of the country is going to have difficulties in voting. Um, but the problem is, there's not much can be done. You can't annul the elections because even though it's a high percentage, 20% is very high, it's going to be almost impossible to document what is happening in these communities. So the elections will be accepted and and they will ratify the winner based on the votes that they have at this minute, at that moment, June 2nd, regardless of what has happened in these communities. Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I am saying is the following, that the organized crime is backing not only a particular political party. What they
Okay.
want is to capture local authorities, regardless of the political party that
Right.
they belong.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see so much impact on the national result because
Mm-hmm.
precisely they are involved with different candidates with different political parties.
Mm-hmm.
Also, mostly is with Morena, the official party. Why? Because most places they are governing, they are in
Right.
power.
Mm-hmm.
And also, what I have to tell you is the solution, the way out for this situation is participation, that many people in Mexico go out to
And
vote.
vote. Yeah.
That's the reason I consider a lot of importance
Mm-hmm.
of what is
Mm-hmm.
going to be, what's going to happen next Sunday. If people
Right.
in the cities go to vote, go out to, uh,
Protest.
yeah, I think we can minimize what is the impact of organized crime in the electoral process.
So the largest percent, if as the larger the percentage of people voting, it weakens the official party, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting. Well, you got to come back, Federico, because boy, this information and these news is literally changing by the minute. It'll be interesting to see what happens this Sunday and how many people actually go out and demonstrate. So I really appreciate you joining us, Federico Berrueto, political analyst. He's been joining us throughout the years. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you for joining us here on Living in Mexico. I'll be right back.